Holodeck 3 program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
One, engage!
All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Discovery Edition, and I am your host, as usual, Michael Flores. And today, as per usual, I'm in the studio with David. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so Dave, we are going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 8, titled All In of Star Trek Discovery. Now, if you are new to our show, we do cover a wide variety of Star Trek content, and you can find our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search From the Holodeck. Our preferred podcast provider is iTunes, because you can leave us 5-star ratings and also drop a review on iTunes. It helps our show grow, and it triggers algorithms that then allow other people to find our show more easily. So please do so. We would appreciate it. Okay, so here we are, David, officially starting our Star Trek from the Holodeck 2022 run, and it's going to be insane.
It's literally starting off like that. I wasn't expecting like this episode to kind of pack a wallop like it did.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, unfortunately, I went into the beginning of this mid-season under the pretense that, you know, what we've gotten in the past, Discovery usually starts winding down after the mid-season. Instead, we got a pretty heavy...
It's winding up.
Yeah, we got a pretty heavy episode.
I would say that this season is written more traditionally. I should say it's written like more traditional television, which is the right way you should do things. You have your moments, you have that build-up, you feel a little bit of closure in the midpoint, but also there are those questions of what's coming around the corner. And you're right, Dave. And then here we are again getting that build-up to something bigger in the show.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get a bit of business out of the way before we get too deep into this episode. We've got to get out of the way what am I trying to say here? Before we get into the episode, there's a bit of business that we need to get through first, and it has to do with how we're going to be breaking things down this year because we are so busy, because there are so many things in the works in the way of Star Trek, and we're going to be trying to cover all of it as much as possible. So this is what we have in store, David. The second half of Discovery Season 4, which we're doing right now. The conclusion to the first half of Star Trek Prodigy, and we'll be getting those episode discussions out soon. We are a little behind.
And if you thought Discovery was getting insane, Prodigy is absolutely bonkers.
Yes. We have Star Trek Picard Season 2 just around the corner that we will also be breaking down. Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3. And then the conclusion to Prodigy's second season by the end of the year. And our commitment to our listeners, we will cover all of it. Now, in order for this to be advantageous for us, we will need the assistance from listeners. We can leverage this flow of content to help drive up our Patreon subscribers. We do need that assistance. Our Patreon content is as follows. This is what we have planned. We have the behind-the-scenes tier, which includes lots of special things. But more importantly to this show, or I should say more specifically to this show, the pre-shows. Star Trek discussions every single episode prior to these regular discussions that you listen to every week on your podcast provider of choice. We offer a pre-show version of that, where we casually discuss recent Star Trek news, maybe get into some episode discussions, things that we can't get into on the regular show for whatever reason.
Yes.
We also, on Patreon, will be covering the Mirror Universe War from IDW Comic Publishing. We're going to be talking about the Star Trek oversized one-shots that were just announced a few weeks ago, a couple Star Trek books that will be coming out this year, also overflow shows where we might dig into certain topics a bit more from episode discussion. So if there's something really big that happens in the way of, canon defining elements, let's say in Discovery or Picard, we may actually have to add another episode to fully get into it and fully dissect it, because to do so on the regular show would mean we'd have like a 2 or 3 hour discussion.
Yeah.
So we would throw that onto Patreon. So the Patreon content is designed to motivate support. If you subscribe for just $5 a month, you do gain access to thousands of hours of content, plus everything we have planned this year for Star Trek from the Holodeck. So we are going to be putting out close to 50 episodes, David, for free, which we have never done that before on Star Trek from the Holodeck. In fact, I don't think there's a show on this network, from the last 10 years that we've been broadcasting that has ever reached 50 episodes in a single year. Typically, our shows across the board, we typically shoot for 20 to 26 episodes a year.
Well, that's a testament to how, Star Trek, the franchise itself has been treated well by Paramount. They know how to space things out. I mean, if you look at other franchises like in Marvel, Star Wars, DC, they try to do the year-round thing, but they find that basically a lot of their viewership gets burnt out.
Because it's all the same.
It's all the same, all in all again. But the beauties that I've been noticing with, I know a lot of people have been hating on Alex Kurtzman, but the thing that has been his genius...
They're all distinct.
They're all like... I can turn to someone. If you don't like Discovery, go watch Lower Decks.
Right.
It is hilarious. It is not like Discovery. Or go watch Prodigy. If you don't like Lower Decks, it's a much more serious animation, and it's definitely not like Lower Decks.
Yeah.
So
we are going to be following along all of that. That's the point here. So over 50 discussions, and in order for it to, I guess, I just say, in order for us to do this, because I'll tell you right now, this is just an experiment we're doing for this year. If we can't leverage this to help us on the Patreon side, then we're probably going to cut it across the board, and we're going to have to pick a couple shows to cover, because we can't do 50 plus episodes a year unless you, the listeners, are subscribing to Patreon. If you subscribe to Patreon, it helps leverage the content we want to put out there, and it helps us with the massive expense of running a studio. Yeah. As you can see behind me, there's a lot of equipment. If you're watching the video, we have a full radio station, essentially, and it does cost a lot to run the studio. And the only way we actually bring in or can bring in money at this point in time is through subscribers.
Yep.
So it's not like we're asking you to give us money for nothing. We're giving you 50 plus episodes this year plus Patreon content. That's a lot of shit. That's going to be almost 75, 80 pieces of content. Yeah. All right. So let's get into this. Wait, did I tell people where to go for Patreon? Patreon.com/RainManDigital. All right. So let's get into the episode. The book and Tarka. Let's start here.
Okay, we're gonna start with the heavy stuff. Okay.
Oh yeah, let's start with the heavy stuff. So this episode, David, was focused on a few things. Some were implied, and others were explicit. This episode, I believe, was far better and deeper than some sites and fans are giving credit or saying.
I think so too. Yeah.
The relationship between Book and Burnham is being handled maturely. At times, and depending on how it works out, it was a bit Shakespearean, and it may end for Book in tragedy. So that is actually being handled fairly well. I don't see Book seeing the error in his ways until it's too late. I have a feeling he's going to be the attrition for this season, either emotionally or with his life. It's not going to end favorably for him and Burnham.
Narratively, I think you're right. I think that basically if the story goes the way it's been told narratively, this should not end in a happy ending.
No, well, look how they built that up in this episode. The division between the two of them. It is an animosity. It's a sadness. It's a sadness that shows a chasm between their political outlooks. And that's something that also worked for me in this episode. From a purely socio-political context, the episode is an allegory for the political divide in this country. We live in an era that is highly divisive. Families are being torn apart based on ideological differences, and it does appear the writer is using the current, or I should say the writer of this episode is using the current social landscape to craft bits of the melodrama with notes of the real. And it helps to inform the audience from a psychoanalytical perspective. It's a subtle strategy to create psychological rapport. We understand these divisions right now in families. I don't think there's a person out there that has not experienced some type of confrontation with a close friend or family member because of this deep political divide that we have currently in American culture.
Well, the thing that has basically made that possible in this episode too is like they're not going the stereotypical route, at least not yet. They're not going the stereotypical route of showing Book as he's completely wrong. You know,
the interpretive.
Yeah, he's not suddenly turned into the ultimate villain.
No,
right?
not at all.
Instead, you kind of understand Book where he's coming from.
Yep.
And the sad part is you understand where Burnham's coming from also, but you also see that the divide is there is no way Burnham could ever understand the loss that Book is going through right now. There's no way. And there's no way for Book to understand, hey, this is who Burnham is now. She has responsibilities. She's a quote-unquote captain now.
You are right, Dave, and that's why it goes back to one of the strongest elements in the previous episode, which is the whole moral relativism aspect, where, you know, hey, everyone has their own views, essentially, on what's moral and what is not, or I should say ethical as well. So I like what they're doing between the two of them because it's very representative, it's very representative of real life.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing that Star Trek writers can always do. I mean, ever since the days of, I'm not quite sure of the 60s when it comes to the original series, if they did a few episodes touched on the civil rights, a few on the openness of sexuality, but it was good. But for its time, it was a little bit of a scrape of the surface. It was superficial. We didn't really get deep into covering current events from a more subtle perspective or a subtle point of view until TNG with the Cardassians.
Yeah.
That's when they started getting into current politics and then using the form of the science fiction genre to explore those areas.
Yeah.
And of course, we know Deep Space Nine did it, and now Discovery is using the aspect of that familial divide. And dude, just from visuals as well, visual metaphor, having Burnham and Book face off at the poker table was so creative, and it created this metaphor that helped convey context.
Yes.
The construction of the mise-en-scène. You have the framing, you're keeping them separate across. You had all these different things splitting them. You had I forgot the name of the alien character in the center. You had the card table filmed in a specific way that actually made the table look extended or elongated, so that the divide between the two of them
was so long.
Looked bigger. It was exaggerated. So there was a lot of thought that went into the visuals as well in order to support the narrative.
The narrative. And that's the thing that I think Discovery when it gets it right very well. You know, there's been many times and many occasions, especially in like Star Trek in its history, when writers or filmmakers have tried to tackle the idea of philosophy and put it into their storytelling, and then all of a sudden it just becomes, just like what you said, superficial, or it's just barely scratching the surface. Here in this episode, if you are actually paying attention to the story, It's really deep. And I know that a lot of people out there are basically trying to make this story sound really simple. Oh, it's a lover's quarrel between Book and Burnham.
Is there notes of melodrama? Absolutely.
Absolutely. But like, it's more than just a lover's quarrel.
Yeah.
It's about it's about two people who have distinct ideological differences, and the question becomes, can they come together? Can they actually coexist? And what this episode did perfectly was showing the great freaking mountain that they have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what you said, I don't think this is going to end well.
No.
Because in all honesty, when you look at Book's rationale,
There's no coming back from this.
there's no coming back for him.
There could have been. I think that was the point of the episode. This was almost like a way station, a calm before the storm, giving Book and our characters an opportunity to give each other one last chance, because that was the moment where Burnham knew, Book knew that there's no coming back. I think Burnham thought, okay, if I got face to face with him, I can try to convince him.
Yeah.
But after that, I think she realized, there's no convincing him, and it's done.
Yeah, and the thing is like,
And that's the tragedy of it.
that's the tragedy of it. And like, during the whole time, the thing I really liked, how the narrative portrayed both characters. No one was seen as the bad guy, because we all understand everyone's point of view as the outside audience.
Yeah.
Because like that's the whole thing that I've been really digging about Book is like, after this episode, I was like going, there is no way people could understand that idea of loss, right? The idea of someone's grief, and try to understand it themselves when they haven't even been put through it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this episode, it especially how it was portrayed and acted, you kind of get the sense that Burnham realizes this is a lost cause, because there's no way she could ever understand what's in Book's mind after experiencing the loss of his family the way it happened. I mean, essentially, his entire culture is gone. He's nothing. He's a shadow of himself.
Yeah. And that's, again, very important. People do need their culture.
And the
People do need, in order to a lot of the themes of this season is also a lot about identity.
Yes.
And one way people identify is through their culture. And what do you do when your culture is completely and utterly removed?
What are you at that point?
Yeah.
And it brings up the question that, like in the polarizing opposite of the Data idea, where Data is constantly searching for what makes him human.
Yeah.
Book is going through this crisis where he's lost the idea of his self-worth. He's lost the idea of being human.
Yeah.
Because that amount of grief, that's what happens when you are faced with that amount of grief, and it just destroys you, because it's insurmountable.
This is a better version than what JJ did with the Kelvin timeline by destroying Vulcan.
Yeah.
Like, I understand what he was doing, and I was on board, and I'm still on board with that idea. I think it really worked to give oomph behind the new Spock, give him instant motivation. It did work. But we never really got to experience the aftermath of the tragedy. We saw how he reacted to the tragedy, his immediate reaction, but we never got the benefit, because, of course, we're all a bunch of masochists, that love people's pain. But we never got to wallow in his depression. And to see what this does to him. We didn't get to experience that. Whereas with Book, we're getting to see what happens when your entire culture and society or civilization is removed from existence.
That's why in the past episodes, we've discussed about like possible answers to why Book saw that vision, of his father.
Mm-hmm.
And after this episode, dude, I'm really thinking there's nothing to that vision. There's no great alien that's trying to affect him. There's nothing like that. That vision was his grief in Book's mind, taking effect in his brain. And basically, much like how you know, as a person who deals with mental illness and depression and anxiety, when I thought about it after this episode, I'm like going, that vision wasn't some, you know, hint at, oh, there's a big bad in the horizon. No,
Right.
that vision was actually his depression manifested.
Yeah.
And I should have seen it, but the funny part is I wasn't expecting the writers of Discovery to go that route.
Yeah. It does work a lot, but
It works a lot.
all this, and it needs to work for a few reasons, because Book, in order for this story to work, we have to believe, as the audience, we have to believe that Book is blinded by emotion.
By emotion, right?
Otherwise, a lot of the things, both implied and explicitly stated, will not work with the audience. And we're going to get into this right now. He's not seeing the red flags.
Yeah.
He's not able to see them because he's too emotionally compromised. And I don't think he can trust Tarka. And if he was of a more level or evenly minded and not so emotional, he might be able to see that Tarka is not the answer to his problems. As I said, there's a lot of implied meaning that was left for us to sort through, the audience I'm talking about here.
And the beauties of it, too, is like the storytelling of Book. When I look at it after this episode, it just makes my head explode. Is like, you see the signs there as a person that suffers through depression and stuff like that. You see, I should have seen the red flags. He starts manifesting his reasoning in his mind that he has to do this terrible atrocity, and because of the grief, right? Then he starts giving away things. Like he gave away his cat, which seems like a small thing, but when you think about it now, when I think about it after analyzing this episode, that's a very...
He doesn't plan on coming back.
He doesn't plan on coming back, and that's a telltale sign of someone who is suffering through depression.
Yeah.
And basically says, I'm leaving everything behind. I'm going to leave this to this person and say goodbye and yada, yada, yada. That is a red flag. And then trusting someone like Tarka is another red flag of a person who is mentally compromised.
Yeah. Tarka is more dangerous than we had thought. He's very emotionally compromised, maybe even more so than Book. The scene with Oo helped us get a better gauge as to where Tarka is emotionally, and it was a very effective scene between the two of them. What did he say? Oh
man, I forgot. It was a really powerful thing to say too.
Okay, well, yeah. What was the quote? I'll get to that in a second. The reason why this entire scene was so effective was because we learned a lot of things, okay? Now, yes, he is emotionally compromised. We already know that he's willing to do probably anything in order to get home. At least that's what he's saying. Also, the reason why he might be even more dangerous than we had expected originally or suspected, him being from another universe, or Tarka being from another universe, doesn't appear to be common knowledge, because it's clear that Admiral Vance is clueless as to Tarka's motivations or designs to get home.
Yes.
So that also is another red flag for the audience. Well, if Admiral Vance, who seems to really trust Tarka, doesn't even know that he's from another universe, that's an issue. Why hasn't Tarka shared this information with anyone else? It seems possible that Tarka might end up having a much larger involvement with the overall myth arc than I had originally thought. Perhaps Tarka knows more about this species than he's leading on. He very well could have faced this species in his universe and lost. Perhaps his family and his people were killed.
Yeah.
So this could be about revenge or redemption, crossing over, killing them, even though it's not the same. Maybe in his mind it is. Maybe this is also some way of kidnapping the family from this universe and taking them back home. Who knows when you're emotionally compromised?
Yeah.
Revenge is definitely a part of it for both Book and Tarka. Keeping a promise to someone who died, I want to say, was something they alluded to. Tarka said, there are varying degrees of loss, and if you can feel the weight of mine, there's little choice due to that feeling.
Yes. And dude, that right there in the episode was where it like tipped me off to basically we're thinking too simplistically with the narrative of Discovery this season. You know, we were thinking, oh, there's a big bad around the horizon. You know, you're going to have, you know, similar to what we would expect in Discovery of Past. You know, big bad, crew comes together, and you're going to have a very dynamic, you know, and lead up of the antagonist, like a character like Tarka, who is compromised, but there's this manipulating force in the shadows. After this, I'm like, no,
It's Tarka.
it's Tarka, because
Yeah.
Tarka is, and I wrote it on my notes, and I mentioned it to you, and you told me to mention it in the show, was like, to me, Tarka is like Captain Nemo.
Mm-hmm.
He's chasing his white whale. And Book, who's going through the same process as Tarka, is getting dragged with him. And it's...
Well, and David, you are absolutely right with that comparison, because this is why Tarka's potential desperation can turn more dangerous.
Yes.
This is the stuff that makes up the bulk of some really great introspective literature from it. I was going to go with the direction of Victorian era because of a lot of the goth fiction.
Yes.
Has a lot of these types of characters, the woes of the mad scientist, or the desperate man or woman of science that will go to great lengths to break the laws of nature.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's not Captain Nemo, it's Captain Ahab.
Yeah. From
Captain Ahab,
Moby
from
Dick.
Moby
yeah.
Dick.
Yeah.
But that's what Tarka
Well,
is.
Captain Nemo would fit though too.
Well, yeah, but the idea of a person obsessed with revenge,
Yeah.
that is it, Captain Ahab. That's
No, for sure. Yeah.
That's Moby Dick. That's Captain Ahab being strung up next to that white whale and getting dragged into oblivion.
Yeah, and all of this, Dave, is the reason why Tarka might be the most intriguing character this season. And I don't want to jump to conclusions, Dave. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't like to disappoint myself. But what if... Here we go.
Here we go.
What if Tarka is the character we've been waiting for? That defining literary character that's used as a writing device to create antagonistic or problematic scenarios that challenge the ideological or moral / ethical values of our characters. Because who motivated Book to steal the spore drive?
Tarka.
Betray Burnham and run off to seek revenge.
Tarka.
It was Tarka. He's the catalyst. Everyone has their tell. How many times did they say that during this episode? Suddenly, we've got ourselves in a serious situation besides just simply the DMA, which up to this point has been a relatively abstract threat. Now, from this DMA threat, a potentially greater threat emerges in the form of Tarka. This is the real threat. Someone that feels justified by their actions is always the greatest threat. Because what's that saying? No one feels like they're the bad guy in their own story.
Yeah.
Tarka is justified. In his mind, he's justified. This type of belief is what brings about some of the worst atrocities. Sacrifice is always heavy. You know, doing it for the right reasons should help, but never does. That's another line Tarka said.
Mm-hmm.
Sacrifice is always heavy. Doing it for the right reasons should help, but never does. He's already planning something.
He's already planning something. And the only issue that I would have with that
Is this our con? Is this our con, David?
I'm thinking that it might go that route, but here's the thing. That means that for me, Tarka has to die then in the end. He has to.
Or something horrible happens to him. We tuck him away for 2 or 3 seasons, and we bring him back with an even bigger story, and he's even more vengeful.
That could work.
And he finds us in space aboard the USS Reliant. That'd be so bad.
Seti Alpha
He's
5.
Where's Captain Burnham?
As Captain
Admiral Burnham. Admiral Burnham.
Dude, I
That's
love
so
that.
bad.
I love that scene though in Con because
Of course.
you can see it like Ricardo Montalban plays that character beautifully, but when you watch that scene, it's almost like Khan is his anger just spikes knowing that Kirk became an admiral,
Yeah.
and he's like going, Admiral, and it's like
It's almost like it's almost like Of course he's an admiral now. It's
Yeah.
almost like I suffered and you prevailed. Yeah.
And it's done so brilliantly. I'm like going, that would be awesome.
All right, we can't get into that. Save that. But
Yeah.
David, this could be, and this is the right actor as well for that type of role. And when I
Yeah.
say our Khan character, if you're a new listener, I just mean that some of the best characters or villains in Star Trek aren't always villains necessarily. Khan is a guy that wanted his people to live. His methods were brutal because he was brought up during a brutal time in human history. So his methods didn't age well. But he wasn't, I would call, an evil person.
No.
General Chang from Star Trek VI was a bit of a nationalist. He
Yes.
believed in Klingon purity and the Klingon way and did not want the infiltration of the Federation. Who are other great characters? The Borg, I would
Borg.
say, are definitely a defining villain of
Q.
the TNG era. Q is more of an arch nemesis slash antagonistic force.
But again, he's not, a flat out villain.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
And then
So if we get our version of that for Discovery, because we are due for that, we need one. We need Discovery to churn out that one villain that everyone gravitates to and points to years down the road and says, "Oh, you remember that one season where you had Tarka and he like did this and did that? He was just amazing in retrospect when you break down what they were doing with the character." So,
or for
if
next
you look,
for next generation fans, the greatest character like that is Lore. Lore's not a villain. When you actually look at his story, you really feel sorry for him.
he's a little misguided and detached.
Yeah, and it's all because of one thing. He was abandoned by his father. His father threw him away by the wayside
Because
because
it's the parents' fault. Why?
I know. Do you know that?
Just be good parents,
Just be good parents,
and you'll
But,
have
like,
good people.
Lore was created. He wasn't naturally evil. He just was imperfect, and then, his father tossed him away because he's not as good as
He
his
was
older
fueled by
brother.
jealousy.
Yeah, he wasn't as good as his younger brother.
Yeah. So, David, Tarka needs to be it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're season 4 Discovery. I'm not saying he shouldn't die this season, but whatever he does needs to be felt in the very fabric of our characters.
Yeah, my thing is Tarka or Book. I think Book.
What if Book becomes that?
Book becomes
oh,
the villain.
wow.
Because, dude, after this episode, I thought of that. I'm like going, if you're expecting Book to all of a sudden be healed by the love of Burnham,
Yeah.
no, that cannot and should not happen.
Yeah.
Because
Have some
we've put-
conviction, bro.
yeah, we've come to the understanding of Book is going through this idea of great loss. He's lost his self-worth. Burnham's not going to fill that up. I'm sorry.
He'd fill her up. Oh, that's
But-
inappropriate.
No amount of cheesy melodramatic love
No.
is going to heal Book.
Yeah, and there was a part of me that was a little nervous for that because we all know that Discovery is the most touchy-feely
It is.
Star Trek show. Everyone loves each other.
Loves each
Everyone
other.
likes to touch each other and give each other little positive affirmations. Oh, you're the best.
You're the best. The power
Yay.
of math. But I think that
I just want to go be a part of that crew and just fuck up the rapport of everyone.
you would ruin Stamets' life, wouldn't you?
See Stamets. You see that? I saw Colbert checking out the hot engineer during the night shift, if you know what I mean.
Or no, you
Might
just
wanna
go.
keep
You go up to Colbert. Are you sure you what do you see in him?
Yeah, listen, come on.
Come on.
Does he have a pretty face? No.
He's always crying.
He better have a big dick, at least. Right, Colbert? There's going to be some reason why you're with him. Let's be honest. Colbert's a 10 and Stamets is like a 3.
3. It would be,
Oh, wait, hold
so
on.
sad.
He's an Arizona 3. That's where we live. So in California, where he's from, he's like a 1.
He's a 1.
He's an LA 1. That's so fucked up.
It is. But that's the thing is the series is missing that one clear-cut villain that we can all say is We want them to come back again and again.
Yeah, and David, we're talking a lot about people's views and their ideology and how they don't necessarily view themselves as the bad guy and they feel like they're justified. All of that's why I said the implied in this episode is a lot, and it actually substantiates what we talked about during our last discussion pertaining to ethical relativism, where everyone has their own idea of morality, and who's to say you're right, you're wrong, because why? Because the way you grow up and your society tells you to do this and his society tells him to do that. So the fact that they're trying to build that foundation of, hey, there are different views and different perspectives, and then we have these heavy implications of that in this episode. We are going down a route that's not going to be great. It's not going to be, when I say great, I mean for our characters. It's going to be devastating because there's going to be characters that think they're doing the right thing and they're going to be making all the wrong decisions. And the same thing goes for Tarka. Like, Tarka may be on paper the villain, let's say it ends up happening that way, but he's not going to be written with the villain finesse. He isn't going to be laughing in the shadows. He isn't plotting some grand scheme to kill society. Like, that's not his end game. His end game is probably going to be closer to Dr. Who's that guy from Star Trek 7? Why? Put me back.
Oh, put me back. That was
the Nexus guy.
The Nexus, Dr.
I mean, it's Malcolm McDowell is the actor who's amazing.
But that character, that is the type of character that I think Tarka is. That guy who's just so obsessed at this point with revenge or whatever emotion that's going through his mind that is all consuming. That's all he cares about. And it'll be interesting. Like, that's why I said Tarka, I don't think Tarka can continue on in Discovery because his story, majority of the times, a character like that has to be killed. Because that's the tale of a revenge tale, is like they become so obsessed that they just lose themselves and in essence they die.
Dr. Soren.
Yeah. And I think that's where Tarka is going to be heading. Now, I like the idea more of Book becoming the Khan of Discovery because I honestly feel that at the end of this, especially when, this whole episode, a majority of it is dealing with the aftermath and everyone dealing with the fact that Book just quote unquote betrayed them.
Yeah.
There's no turning back for Book. And at the end of this, Book the way that I see the scenario is Tarka ends up dying and Book is left by himself, but it doesn't remove his grief.
Yeah.
And Burnham's thinking, Burnham and all of Starfleet think, it's okay. Everything's okay, right, Book? And Book is like, no, nothing's okay anymore. And then just leaves.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if it's gonna be that clear cut, but we'll see. I'll be okay. As long as the story keeps going in this direction, I honestly don't care how they end it. As long as they stick to their obvious game plan. I feel like in years past, Star Trek Discovery sets up this really great story, and then the last episode and a half just kind of fizzles.
The cry of a child.
Yeah, it's not horrible by any means. It's just kind of anticlimactic. You're like, oh, okay, I see. All right, so for the more explicit aspects of the episode, the crew of the Discovery managed to collect additional data on the DMA's origins, or I should say unknown species 10C's coordinates. So the mysterious species from beyond the Great Barrier is far more technologically advanced than they had assumed. There's a structure or habitat, I guess, that's large enough to house a star and several celestial bodies inside. So that's essentially a solar system.
Yes.
Imagine if someone were to construct a structure of some sort around our sun, Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. That's what we're dealing with here. I think that's interesting, and that's really heavy in the way of, I don't think we've ever seen an alien species in Star Trek in its 50 plus years that has been that strong and not be a super being. Super beings have no need for structures this big.
Yeah.
Super beings you can sometimes reason with because of their higher intelligence. And many times it seems like they're more about proving themselves as some type of higher life form. But they don't want to kill you because deities don't kill because they have no one to worship them.
The closest thing that you could possibly...
This is like the Expanse in Enterprise. Do you remember?
Yes.
Is it the Expanse in the finals, or was it the third season of Star Trek Enterprise? The villains of season 3, they had the technology to create an entire planet encapsulated. I want to say in a structure.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like there's not very many beings we know of that are that all powerful. I mean, the closest ones that I thought of were the Guardians of Forever.
The Xindi is what they were called from Star Trek Enterprise.
Star Trek Enterprise, and then like beings like that, or even like you could even say like the beings that Voyager ran into toward the end of their season, where it was like they were in another, I think it was like a pocket universe or something.
Yeah, species 8473.
8473.
Yeah, something like that.
And then like those are the type of beings that I'd be thinking that, okay, that's where they're leading towards for the DMA. Maybe even, we've talked about it, the god, the being that is in the center of the universe.
Yeah, but the thing is that those types of creatures, that's why I'm saying it's not them. This is something, I feel like these beings are they're less abstract and more tangible. They're not going to be those classic super beings that we had theorized, because a super being doesn't necessarily need an enclosed structure.
Yeah, why does God need a starship?
Exactly, David, exactly. So what makes this even more complicated is that they figured out that the DMA is nothing more than a way for this unknown species to mine needed materials known as boronite to sustain the energy needed to power their structure. This is a species that's simply conducting mining, which then, David, brings in the entire aspect of moral relativism yet again.
Yes.
Are they doing anything wrong? All they're simply doing is mining. I feel like we're moving into areas of environmentalism as well, which is nothing new to Star Trek. Star Trek has delved into environmentalism
many times.
Many times. Which I'm fine with that, as long as it's subtle. Don't beat us over the head. Leave it all. Imply.
But when they did that, it definitely
changed things.
It changed things. It changed how you see the narrative and see the story unfolding.
Because how do you even know? Like, okay, so are this unknown species? Do they know what they're doing? Okay, because that's one view. That's one thing that can take our narrative in one direction. Let's say they're not aware of what they're doing. Okay. Well, let's say the opposite. Let's say they are aware that through the process of their mining, they're killing people. But to them, these people are insects. They're so lower than them at every level in an advanced civilization capacity that they don't care. They don't feel like they're doing anything wrong.
Exactly.
That allows the narrative to go in a completely opposite direction. So at this point, we're at a bit of a crossroads when it comes to speculation, because what's the threat? Is it going to be the issue of mining the boromite, which is connected to the DMA and the unknown species, or is this real threat going to be Tarka and Book?
That's where I totally agree with what you said earlier. I think Tarka is the main threat.
And honestly, David, you know what my theory is? I know you have yours. You know what I think is going to happen? I almost feel like this species doesn't realize that there's intelligent life.
Exactly.
And what's going to happen is you're going to wake the sleeping giant.
Yes.
Book and Tarka are going to nudge this dragon that's coveting all the gold inside the dwarf cave. They're going to nudge him. And suddenly it's going to rear its head and realize, oh, what are these people over here doing? That's exactly how the Borg was introduced.
Yes. And I honestly think
I think that's what's going to happen.
That's going to happen.
And I don't know if it's going to be a massive ramification this season or later. I almost feel like Tarka and Book are the focus for this season and what they're going to do. And I almost feel like this season's going to end on that note. The revelation that this unknown species goes through when they realize, who are these people? Are they a threat? And they may view us as a threat after we try to destroy them. And suddenly we're now faced, the Federation's faced with this advanced species like the Federation has never seen before. And I'm happy with this if they end up going in this direction, because what have I said about this new era of Star Trek? We need to quit dredging up the past, and we need to start moving forward and blazing our own trails. And one thing that I can say about Discovery this season is they have focused on blazing new trails this year rather than continually harping on the past.
And do you realize the amazing thing about this, Mike? I mean, ever since we started the season, we criticized. I remember us criticizing them blowing up and destroying Quajon, and it just seemed like they did it just to create melodrama for Book.
Right.
And now we're standing here during this episode at the end of this going, it all was worth it. Mm-hmm. It mattered. The whole thing about
what?
The whole thing about his
putting something in your TV show that matters. What?
Exactly.
What is this about? It
actually mattered to not just Burnham, but the development of a character that could potentially be the overall iconic villain that Discovery needs.
Yeah. It could end up being great. All right, get more from the Holodeck content by pledging to our Patreon page. This year, we've got a wide variety of Trek content planned for Patreon subscribers, so you don't want to miss out. Pre-shows, exclusive podcast episodes like reviews on Trek novels, comic books, and topical discussions revolving around various Star Trek elements, and more. So head over to patreon.com/RaymanDigital and pledge a minimum of $5 a month to gain access to our podcast and behind-the-scenes tiers. When you do so, it helps us continue to broadcast on the air and justify the hours of content we give out for free every single year. If we are to continue to broadcast and produce more episodes, we do need the assistance from the viewers. As I had said at the top of the show, I estimate that we'll have over 50 new episodes this year from the free side. And we can only do these types of things if we hit certain Patreon subscribing numbers. So if you like our show, get more of what you like, go to patreon.com/RaymanDigital. Okay, Dave, so a few other things worthy of note. I cannot tell you how happy I am, David. Can we please take a moment to congratulate Captain Burnham on finally becoming a captain and taking it on the chin and following orders?
Yes.
I was waiting for her to argue with Vance and then the president, and I'm like, oh my God, she's actually taking this like a mature captain should take.
And she's not crying.
She's not crying.
She's not crying.
She's not talking back. She's not being rebellious. Have we finally turned over a leaf, David, when it comes to her character?
I'm truly hoping so, because like that moment when President Rilek just tears into Burnham.
Yeah.
I'm like going, it was pretty low below the belt, but it was also very understandable because from Rilek's point of view, it's very easy to see that Burnham probably is compromised because of Book.
Yeah.
And the fact that the way Burnham reacts is very mature and very captain-like. She doesn't cry. She doesn't yell.
I was waiting for her to do that desperate plea with her eyes that she does before she cries.
Yeah.
And listen, as a man, solely as a douche right now, I love it. She's hot. I'm like, yes, give me those eyes. Give me those sad eyes. But as a captain. But as a person watching a show and critiquing it, I'm like, okay, let's start seeing you act like a captain. And there was no emotion that wasn't warranted being shown in the scenes with Book. It was the right amount. I'm thinking the writers are finally finding that middle ground
Yes.
And it's really working for her character this year.
And I like the actual adage. We get to finally see Vance do something. And what I mean by that is Vance take initiative and show that he's willing to back the Discovery crew.
And also have his own story a bit as well.
Yeah.
A bit of a subplot, because for the most part, he's just kind of been a stand-in for authority.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. Now they're giving him a little bit more of a personal flair by bringing up his family and how he has brought them back to live with them. And now he may have to bring them back or take them back because of the danger that's now, knocking down their door. So I do like that they were giving us a bit of Vance, a little bit more for Vance as well. Hugh Colbert blames himself for not being able to help Book.
Oh, no. This is Stamets' fault. Colbert, don't blame yourself.
Yes, Colbert. You see them washboard abs? I saw you on the cover of Out magazine. Don't be coy.
Don't be coy. It's not your fault. It's that one that's next to you.
So stupid.
I feel so bad because Anthony Rapp is an actually good-looking dude.
And you know what? This season, he's actually a lot better than he's been. Almost see all the things that irritated me about him. They were there a little bit at the beginning of the season, but for the most part, they have completely disappeared. I just don't like his constant whining and complaining.
That's the thing.
And he's not doing that this year.
As a card-carrying bisexual male, Mike, Anthony Rapp's a good-looking dude, but when Stamets opens his mouth, it drops, and it drops.
He goes from a Hollywood 4 to Hollywood 1,
and then it goes to a Hollywood 1, exactly. And it's like that's normal because Stamets is just so unlikable. Because I'm sorry, he's constantly crying.
I know.
He's constant.
Honestly, there's just way too much touchy-feely on this ship.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Picard in this environment? Early Picard, TNG Picard. He would be having a shit fit. Anytime someone tries to touch him and ask him how his day's going, be like, what the fuck are you doing?
or the thing that irritated me too about this.
No children on the bridge.
Colbert blaming himself for this. And I'm like going, Stamets, be a good man and stick up for your man. No, he's gonna just stand there and be sad.
I thought you were gonna say give up the ass. I was like, be a good man and give him some love.
Give him some love. Make Culver happy. It's not his fault.
Okay, so another thing is the changeling. Now, my question, because this has never been answered as far as I know in Star Trek. There have been various sentient beings called changelings.
Yeah.
Now, the ones that come to mind immediately is, of course, from Deep Space Nine. And also the other is from Star Trek 6, Undiscovered Country.
Yes.
The fellow inmate of Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy.
Yeah, he hit him in the balls.
Yeah, do you want to get out of here?
Oh my God, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that young lady changeling, I guess. Those are the only two that come to mind right now. I know there's been other ones that have been alluded to, but since Deep Space Nine, there hasn't been any other introductions of changelings. This is the first time. So is this Odo's species or is this another changeling species? Because a part of me felt like because of the fluidity of how it changed back and forth, now it could be 1,000 years of advancement. Maybe they got better with the shifting. Who knows?
Yeah, you got to remember that alien species have changed over time in Discovery. They've done a decent enough job showing the progression.
Now, you did notice that her face, though. That's the only thing. And I'm wondering if this might have been a changeling from Odo's species. Because when they went to their final form, they did have that slight bridge on the nose.
The angular look. And that's what I thought, too. Because, that was a telltale sign of...
What if the founders are in that structure?
Mike, do you want me to go through the bad speculation that could possibly be there?
Hold on. Let's see. How much time do we have? You know what? Let's go to our final thoughts. Then if we have time, I want to get into those ridiculous theories.
I have ridiculous theories.
I want to know who's... Wait, are they your theories or blog theories?
A little both. A little both. I just came up with ridiculous
honestly,
ones.
you probably fit better with those theories from. You probably should write some blogs because some of your theories are ridiculous.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have some doozies.
Okay, so final thoughts. I like the episode. I don't have any complaints. The OO fight scene was okay. At first, I was getting nervous about it because anyone that listens to our shows knows that I have a problem when you pair up a male and a female in a fight, and then you try to convince the audience that a female can
Just punch him in the
take
balls.
out a guy. Now, that's why I was okay with it because of that. Because, for example, the goal to fighting a man is not letting him get close enough if you're a woman. Because once a guy bear hugs you, you're done. You're not going to break free from that unless you are expertly trained in martial arts. So what you need to do is do exactly what OO did and cock punch him.
Cock punch.
I was like,
The power of the cock punch.
Yeah. So the fact that she hustled him, number one, I like that. And then number two, she cock punched him. Listen, you're not the fact that he got up and still tried to put on a fight says a lot about that guy. Because if I got cock punched, I'm done. I'm like, oh, you win. I'm fucking out.
Exactly. And unfortunately for me, that was the one that I told you I was kind of iffy on because it just seems so stereotypical and it seems so.
Listen, what are you gonna do, Dave? Listen, I'm not a woman, and yet I would do a cock punch. If there was a giant dude coming at me, guess what I'm doing? Cock punching.
Well, the funny part is especially with Star Trek, they've done the joke of cock punching so much better. I mean, come on. You mentioned the movie earlier, Undiscovered Country. What did Kirk do?
Right.
He kicked him in the kneecaps because McCoy told him about that the reproductive organs were in the knees.
Yeah, no, it wasn't McCoy. It was the changeling.
Oh, it was the changeling that said it.
He's all, not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place.
In the same place. Yeah. And I'm like going, the O stuff was kind of hit or miss for me. That's partially what brought my score down.
You talking about the fight stuff?
Yeah,
I
fight
could have
stuff.
done without it as well.
I could have done without it because it just, I don't know. For me,
felt
it just
a little
felt
out of place.
Out of place.
Yeah.
I was like going, did we?
We never
did we
saw
ever
that she was an expert fighter like that.
Exactly. I was like going, I don't remember them saying that. Oh, is like this super martial artist apparently.
Yeah, and David, the way I look at it is you gave us a great story that was written well. The narrative was structured just fine. So that's why stuff like that, I'm not going to harp on too much when it comes to my final thoughts, because overall the episode was
Solid.
very solid. I'm going to give this episode an 89%.
I'm with you there. I'm actually have the same score for with you as an 89. Because it's so hard to find narrative issues in this episode. The only issues I have is like quote unquote creative choices, and I can't dock too much on this episode for those
Creative choices like
with the OA stuff.
Oh, okay.
I was like going, why do we have to have her join the freaking Fight Club? Isn't there something else that she could have done? Instead of then lead to a cock punch.
It's just like the problems I had in the first season of Discovery when Georgiou, who is probably a $110, she's very thin.
Yeah.
And you have Burnham, who's also very small, and they're going head to head
with Klingons. And it didn't
like
seem
that,
right.
Yeah, it felt, and there was body contact. They were too close. If they found a way to choreograph the scene to where they managed to keep the Klingons at bay and fight them on their own terms, which, allowed them to move quicker than them, then that would work.
Yeah.
But that really gets under my skin. And it doesn't just bother me. It bothers actors as well. There was an interview I watched years ago with Charlize with Charlize Theron, and she was talking about that movie that she starred in a few years back, Atomic Blonde.
Yeah.
And she said one of the first things she did when she got on set, or when she got brought onto the project, I should say, was she had a conversation with the director and said, this is a very action-oriented script, and that's why I'm here. This appeals to me, but I want to make sure that my action when I'm fighting men is realistic. And she said, that's why, she said, when you watch the movie, you're going to see that I use everything and anything I can when I'm fighting men. I'm using objects on the wall. I'm grabbing pans. I'm grabbing, pictures. Anything I can find, I'm using it as a weapon. And I never let these people get close to me. And when I do, I use my entire body and use the weight of my body to cause the man to fall and feel, imbalanced, basically off kilter. There we go. And that way, she said, it justifies why I can kick everyone's ass.
Mm-hmm. And that idea too is also what strikes me in Star Trek and in Discovery, in regards to Discovery too, is like, it's not so much as it's a man versus a woman for me, but if we're supposed to believe that these quote unquote male characters are aliens, right? And yet all these gigantic aliens are, they're helpless against a smaller alien species. That doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah.
That hurts my Star Trek brain.
Yeah, and we're kind of harping on it now, but honestly, it's not a negative.
It's not
overall.
a negative. It didn't take the score down.
You said 89% is what you're giving it?
89 with you too. I was right there with you because it was just a really strong narrative episode.
So we have 60 seconds, Dave. Why don't you give me one of either your theories or something you've heard online?
Okay, I'm going to go with one that I thought
have the
of.
tomatoes ready.
I have one that I thought of, but also I can verify that more than myself have thought about this in this episode. Okay, when they mentioned that basically they were mining, I literally thought of, what would be really funny and bad is if it was Nero.
Oh, come on. Why would it be Nero?
Because he got sucked into a black hole. We don't know what was on the other side. We know that his ship, it wasn't destroyed.
I'm alive, motherfuckers. I'm
exactly.
Alive. David,
Nero's alive.
David, never write for Star Trek.
And then he'll pop out and say, I know your brother.
and then suddenly Khan joins him, and they're both on the same side trying to defeat the Federation. David, horrible idea.
Horrible idea?
Give me one more doozy. Go ahead.
Let's see. What was the one that I saw originally?
I've seen some pretty bad ones online.
What have you seen? Because I gave you one that I verified that at least I'm not the only one who thought this.
A lot of people are thinking it's more and more what we were talking about. The Shakari, the god of Shakari.
That's the other one I was going to bring up, the god of Shakari.
Like probably his species. But again, after this episode, I don't think it would be a species like that. I think we're talking a more tangible being.
Yeah, why would it be
something more physical? If you're not a physical species, then you don't necessarily need a structure of that size, unless it's not even a structure. I'm assuming it's a habitat or a housing structure of some unit. Perhaps it's just a way to collect energy for some reason.
Yeah, the thing is, at this point, after this episode, when they gave the description of what's there, I basically said it can't be anything like the god of Shakari or the founders, because why in the world would any of those species need a structure to live in? The god of Shakari, it's kind of like what Kirk said. Why does God need a starship? Why would the god of Shakari need this DMA to get out if he couldn't get out of the center of the universe to get go?
I think it's the villains. What are the name of the villains again from Lower Decks this past year?
Oh man, they were my favorite too.
Yeah, make us strong species.
Make us strong.
Like, listen, they're super strong. They must have found some alien technology that was abandoned, and now they're super strong.
What would you?
1,000 years in the future.
Yeah, if the
Packlids. That's what the Packlids.
If the Packlids actually evolved and they show up and they just basically say, "Give us Janeway."
Oh, that's the worst. That David. Okay, I'm going to close out the show. I want to thank everyone for listening. Be sure to head over to our Patreon, please. Patreon.com/RaymanDigital. We have a lot of content and a lot of work to do. It takes me about 3 or 4 hours to work on the show every week. So please, you're not throwing away your money. It's a great investment. Patreon.com. Make us strong. Patreon.com/RaymanDigital. Thank you, David.
Live long and prosper.